Still on the voter registration campaign theme, South Africa's civil society movement Defend Our Democracy urges citizens of voting age, that is 18 years, to ensure that they have a say in the future of the country. For more on this conversation, we're joined by the movement's Executive Director, Zaakirah Vadi. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, Zaakirah, while there's a voter registration turnout has reached an all-time high so far, with at least 27 million having registered, notwithstanding this weekend's numbers, is Defend Our Democracy seeing a change in voter participation?
I think we've certainly seen a positive change between the last voter registration weekend and this voter registration weekend, especially with people registering online. And predominantly younger people or new voters coming on board. So I think there has been a positive shift. Certainly from news reports, we see that younger people are quite engaged with the political process at the moment. But we still find that there's a very big number of about 15 million people that are not yet registered to vote. And our appeal to them from the time of this registration weekend up until the time that elections are proclaimed is to go out and make sure they register to vote or to go online and to do the registration process there.
Yeah, and that's very important to target those 15 million as well who are eligible and haven't yet registered to vote. But before we even get to them, let's talk about that online impact that you speak of now. We just spoke to the IEC, who was saying that some 48,000 people actually registered online today, and over 730 people pitched at the 23,000 registration centres across the country. These are quite promising figures, would you say?
Definitely. I think the more people that engage into an electoral process, the better for democracy. When people, don't engage in that electoral process and start to pull away, it does become a concern because it does raise questions about whether people are disengaging from a democratic process. So I think it's an important figure, but hopefully over the next day we can see those numbers increase.
What does this tell us? I mean, what are we doing right this time? Because this is the first time in history that we are seeing such numbers for people registering to vote. Would you say it's because we're doing something right, or more people are up in arms and saying, I want to take part in the decision-making of who's going to be making the decisions of the country that I live in?
I think it's a bit of both. We've recently had, issues like potential water shedding. Load shedding is now a common problem. Issues of state capture and corruption. And I think people are starting to begin to realize the importance of politics, political decision-making, and therefore the importance of an election within that broader political spectrum. But at the same time, I think we must commend the IEC for the number of posters, the advertisements that have gone out calling on people to register to vote, as well as political parties who play an important role in making that call either to their constituencies or the broader public. So I think it is a combination of both in this instance.
Would you say that we are seeing the trend of voter apathy also decreasing as we see an increase in participation, as we see an increase in people registering to vote as well?
It's a bit early to tell. When we get to election day, I think that will be the litmus test on whether people come out and vote or whether they don't come out and vote, and really what's the mood of the country at that point in time. The last election that took place, particularly the local government election, there was a very low voter turnout, and hopefully this time we can see those numbers increase. It's certainly something that I think civil society organizations like Defend Our Democracy will be calling for.
Are you positive that there's still enough time to attract those 15 million eligible voters who haven't registered to vote yet?
Well, we have to be realistic. Elections has to be held between May and August this year, and that does give a very short span of time from now up until the point at which elections will be held. So we must be realistic about what's possible, but I think we can be hopeful that those numbers can increase in the next period leading up to the proclamation of elections.
And in your view, Zaakirah, what more do you think should be done to attract those 15 million voters to register?
Well, I think it's discussions around voter education and democracy education. Democracy education being slightly more different in that it expands on why politics is important, why people need to engage within the electoral process. Our call, especially to civil society organizations during this period, is to do that, number one, engage voters on the importance of marking their ballots, making the X, and going out on election day. But at the same time, I think there has to be integrity around the electoral process. And as civil society organizations, we are calling on organizations throughout the country to register as election observers, and in that way play their role by ensuring that this particular election is credible, that it's free and fair, and that it has integrity. And I think through that process of independent observation, we can help ensure that.
And is Defend Our Democracy going to be taking part in observing as well?
Definitely. Today we had about 50 volunteers going out into the different provinces to voting stations just to check as an ordinary citizen whether they are on the voters' roll, what was the process like. And so far that feedback has been really positive. Closer to election time, we would be able to indicate how many civil society organizations, the numbers of individuals that we have out on the field. We want to try and have this as a collective process, but I'm sure there would be others who would independently, separate to the collective called Election Watch, that would go out as well. And again, I think it's a pivotal role that civil society can be playing in this period and exercising, I think, in a very practical way, the concept of active citizenship.
And I know it is early days because it was only today and our next day is tomorrow. But from what your observers have noted by going to some of those registration stations today, were things running smoothly? Were there any concerns that they raised?
So far, everything seems to have gone off smoothly. We obviously don't have the kind of insights that the IEC would have or some political parties would have, who have larger numbers of people on the ground. But thus far, by and large, I think the process has gone smoothly. And we hope that in the next period leading up to elections, a similar sort of calm can prevail, where, people are able to exercise their right to vote in a free and fair manner.
And from Defend Our Democracy's view, would you say that political parties are doing enough in this campaign as well?
Political parties will always want to get across their political message during this period. It's important for political parties, however, to abide by the code of ethics that's set by the IEC and by which they must abide. And I think, things around voter intimidation, ensuring that, there's no violence by the political party. And in this period where social media narratives are so important, ensuring that the narratives that political parties put out are ones that don't call for any sort of violence is going to be extremely important. We see, for example, with countries like the US, where Trump supporters came out after an election and tried to delegitimize that process. We don't want that sort of thing to happen in South Africa. Thus far, the IEC has played a very crucial role in ensuring that our elections have credibility and integrity. And I think going forward into this period, it's something that we think should be maintained, and we hope that the IEC can continue playing this positive role in our democracy.
And while it seems that things are rolling out pretty smoothly, they are not without fault. There will be hiccups here and there. It's just the nature of the business. There are concerns at some registration stations that communities are staging stayaways. Now, this is not the first time that, but how do you convince communities like this who believe that, look, the best way to solve this is to stay away, and opting for this type of action to show their disgruntlement at the state of affairs? How do you go into such communities and do adequate voter education and also convince such individuals as well that it does make a difference to register and vote?
Communities and individuals have the right to choose whether they want to vote or they don't want to vote. That needs to be respected. But similarly, I think that the individual rights, so perhaps in this community, maybe there are two members of the community who feel that they do want to go out to vote, that should be respected and that right upheld. I think when there's a case of, potential intimidation against community members for wanting to do so, it does raise concern. It could potentially warrant, law enforcement coming in, or some of the legal issues around it being brought as well. Our message to anyone eligible to vote during this period is that your vote does make a difference. You may think that you are just one person, but one person, all of those votes are collected and collected together to determine really the future of this country. So don't think that your vote is in vain. It does make a difference, and we hope to see you on election day at your voting stations.
Zaakirah, we appreciate your time with us on Newsroom this evening.